Okay, Assalamu alaikum everybody. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Welcome to another amazing Sunday session on the Book of Illuminations. On Friday we had a really, really incredible khutbah. Sound like a broken record, I say this every week, but it's true, we really do. Every khutbah is really amazing. But this one on Friday was called On Banning Women's Voices While Living in the Modern World. And I think this was kind of a long time coming, hopefully, I don't know. Afterwards, a lot of us were saying that it was a very healing khutbah in many ways. Sheikh actually dug into the jurisprudence and the history behind, the conception and oftentimes, I guess, well-established belief in our community that women are not supposed to give the adhan, they're not supposed to give the iqama, and even in more extreme cases that women's voices are not supposed to be heard. And so it was a really validating and wonderful journey into, what other scholars have said in our history, why this particular conception has, come to live in our time, and what it actually means when you tell women and girls that we don't want to hear your voice in religious spaces, and that God doesn't want to hear you say, Allahu Akbar, or Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah, or, while we live in the world where obviously we hear women in all different kinds of situations and places and contexts. It was an important case study, obviously, for, an important issue in our community. But even more so, it was an important case study for us to, Sheikh to demonstrate the methodology that we're often trying to convey here. For how to approach the world as an ethical Muslim, in 2023, and with the challenges that we face. And, in general, not even just in our time, but in any time, right? You have to be able to master the issues of your day, and you have to understand how we apply these Islamic principles and moral, trajectory that we received as Muslims 1,400 years ago into our time and place so that we actually become relevant. And I always find it so fascinating, when I look on YouTube and I see the reaction. Alhamdulillah, there was a lot of very, very positive reaction. But there are also like the 3 thumbs down when I checked. And I thought, okay, really, what are you saying thumbs down to? You don't want women to speak in our modern age. You don't want women, you don't want to hear women's voices. You don't want to be open to the possibility in our world that 50% of the population, can contribute something. And in fact, we cannot succeed as a people unless you have the vibrant, active participation of 50% of our population. And of course, I think that people are not comfortable oftentimes with our approach. Definitely Sheikh or, Usuli gets accused of being too liberal or trying to change the faith or whatever like that. And it's interesting too because before today's session, we had a book club meeting that I was a part of. I got to see people's reaction to the Prophet's pulpit, and as can be expected, there is some resistance to hearing this kind of approach to our tradition. And one of the people who asked the question said, "Well, I believe in absolute morality," and that this was in a sense a way to convey that somehow what we're doing does not conform to the sense of absolute morality. To which I said, well, listen, absolute morality is sort of a concept that has to take place in your context. You have to, people have to recognize this as morality. We obviously are not interested in relative morality, where it's like things get looser as, times change. But part of what we've been doing here is saying, okay, what is the timeless moral message, and what is the ethic that is, universal, that's timeless, that is divine? And then I shared this really beautiful analogy that Sheikh had shared in a previous khutbah that I was able to return to again because we're now in the process of reading the final draft of Prophet's Pulpit, Volume 3. And I thought that it was a perfect encapsulation of what this methodology and approach means, which is that, as Sheikh points out, and I don't remember which khutbah it was, but that if you take the concept of light, and there was a time where light existed only from the sun. And then as time progressed, it became the sun and oils, and the sun and candles, and the sun and lanterns. And then over time, all of those things plus electricity. And you're still creating light, but you're doing it in the context of your time. And I think that's a really apropos way of understanding, when we create light in our world, we have to understand light as people understand it and as it's meaningful in our time, in our age. And that's really, what we're talking about. And it's so interesting because, some people had a very strong reaction against this approach. And it also reminded me of another part that I read in Prophet's Pulpit 3, where Sheikh pointed out that, this tradition, the Quran, is ripe with possibilities, but the more knowledge you have, the more open you are to that, and the more open you are to dreaming and thinking of possibilities and where humanity can go. And with the less knowledge and the less intellectual ability you have, the more you want to close those possibilities, and you want to say, no, the Quran is very clear, this is the answer, and it should not change. And, we are a space that embraces knowledge and exploration and openness and intellectual growth and critical thinking. And so we, by definition, are open to the possibilities. And a lot of what we try to teach is how do we as individuals unlock that gift that we were given. We were all given a very individual gift. How do we find it? How do we, strengthen it? How do we empower ourselves? How do we liberate ourselves from a lot of this thinking that holds people back? And that is going to be, the future of our world, is how well we can advance ourselves individually so that we can be at the front lines where we're supposed to be and really be, wonderful representatives of God's beautiful religion. And so, it's just, I remember after the khutbah on Friday, or someone who was here was saying, this khutbah healed something in me that I didn't really realize was broken. And, and asked me, do you remember the moment at which things sort of unlocked for you? And I said, yes, actually, I remember very early in my journey when Sheikh and I met, and, the very first time we met, I had a gazillion questions for him. And I think it all stems from that same thing of just feeling like, okay, yeah, this Islam religion is so beautiful, but there are these things that just don't sit well with me. I have questions like, if this is such a beautiful and freeing and liberating religion, then why this and why that? And why does this take place in the mosque? Or why are women treated this way? And I remember that, after enough conversation and me really then getting this methodology and understanding, it's about potential. It's about unlocking, this beauty in you. It's getting rid of those intellectual shackles. And then once you're free, you can fly. And that was a really powerful, healing, liberating moment for me. And I hope that that's what we are trying to convey and pass on to others, through understanding very deeply the meaning of the Quran and now the Book of Illuminations, hopefully, inshallah, the Sirah. And then just seeing week to week at the weekly khutbahs how you take this methodology and you apply it to our world so that our world makes sense and that it liberates us as individuals to make it beautiful and full of light, and how we can contribute that ourselves. So, if you didn't have a chance to watch the khutbah on Friday, definitely do that, or read it next week and when we summarize it. It's a really powerful case study for how to live in our world and how to apply this methodology. It's not surprising that it's scary because it means challenging a lot of preconceived understandings, quote unquote understandings, of what our religion has to say. But this is not a stagnant religion, and we have to be vibrant and ethical and beautiful and at the forefront of the most difficult challenges that are out there. So anyway, it was a really, really lovely weekend and Friday khutbah. So anyway, I'm so excited to continue on this journey of learning and discovery. And I hope for me, this freedom and liberation just continues to come. Every time we learn something new, every time we have an aha moment, I feel like, that healing that you didn't necessarily even know needed to happen happens. And it's just so beautiful. And I think that's what God intended. So alhamdulillah, I'm so grateful that we are here again. Thank you for joining us.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wa subhanallah al-Ali al-Azim. Allahumma salli wa sallim wa barik ala al-Habib al-Mustafa al-Nabi al-Amin al-Mursal rahmatan lil-Alameen Muhammad خاتم الأنبياء والرسل أجمعين وعلى آله الأطهار الميامين وعلى صحبه المختارين وعلى من اتبعه بإحسان إلى يوم الدين. اللهم اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي يا رب العالمين. Did we stop at let's see. So is it did we finish النور له الكشف والبصيرة لها الحكم? We didn't do that? Okay. So did we stop at النور جند القلب? Okay. So okay. النور جند القلب كما النور جند النفس. Okay. Okay, Bismillah. Okay, before we delve in, I want to first, shortly before the halaqah, I heard, and I just have to say it, and I have to, because this is, that is what I believe it is our obligation to do as Muslims. And I just heard that Dr. Abdul Aziz Al Khasraji, who I talked about in some khutbahs before, was sentenced to 15 years in prison in Qatar. Many of you, I'm sure, don't know Abdul Aziz Al Khasraji, but he was one of the few truly brave and outspoken voices. I mean, I didn't, there's a lot that he said that I didn't agree with, especially his views about women and the segregation of women and the exclusion of women, but that is beside the point. The point is that this man spoke out very bravely about the so-called peace treaties being signed with Israel, Emirates, and Sudan and Morocco. He spoke very bravely about the betrayal of Palestinians, about the betrayal of Jerusalem. He spoke very bravely about how Muslims around the world, governments and organizations, were doing practically nothing about Islamophobia. He would often speak about Islamophobic organizations and their funding, and how Muslims basically are not responding. I mean, they seem to trust organizations that are not going to do anything and have not done anything about Islamophobia, like Azhar or some Saudi religious institutions, or even something like CARE, which is CARE with all its best intentions and efforts is overwhelmed and cannot do, it just cannot meet the wave of hate and resources that are being poured into trying to corrupt the minds of your children. And it's and getting your children to feel ashamed about being Muslim. He also spoke very bravely about the obscenity of what Saudi Arabia is doing in inviting a lot of singers and dancers, and the opening the doors to things that are clearly violations of Islamic law, of Sharia, and in Mecca and Medina and in Arabia in general, because Arabia has a very special status in Sharia. And so, it's now one has become accustomed to Muslims cowering and being scared and fearing speaking out. But this man did it. He created a YouTube channel called Qanat al-Mujtama, or the Mujtama station, and he would speak regularly. So about 3 months ago, he disappeared. And then it turned out that Qatari authorities had, under pressure from Saudi and the Emirat, they arrested him. Then they released him conditionally, that with the condition that he doesn't go on social media and does not continue. And then I've just heard that he was tried in a secret national security court, which of course completely lacks procedural rights and guarantees, and sentenced to 15 years in prison. And so, yet again, another Muslim is made an example of, to send a very clear message to Muslims around the world that don't dare have an opinion, don't dare speak out, because we can make an example out of you. And the fact that this is Qatar, the people who fund the Jazeera channel, I mean, it's just so disgusting. I don't know if any of you are, on Twitter, or if I don't know how to do this stuff, and I've never done it, but do a hashtag free Dr. Al-Khasraji. I mean, it affects us all. So I'm quite, I've never actually met this man in person. I've just watched his channel, but I'm just very saddened. One of the very few voices that dares to continue speaking about what Israel is doing to Palestinians, and about the encroachments and weekly violations against Al-Aqsa Mosque, and the violations committed all over Israel against other historical mosques, and the closing down of mosques and turning them into other institutions. He also spoke about Muslims in India. He spoke about Muslims in China quite regularly. And that just, yeah. His name is Abdulaziz Al-Khasraji. We should remember the names. And it should never be normalized. Oppression and despotism and tyranny and injustice should never become normalized. That's killing of the Muslim soul. Okay. The second thing I want to begin with is a little bit on the idea of Nur itself. Because I'm sure you've noticed that when we get, so 53, it says Al-Anwar Mataya Qulub wal Asrar. So 53 begins speaking of so that light, and we've talked, of course, about 53, that light is is like how did the translation says the riding mounts of hearts. Yeah, the lights are like the riding mounts of hearts, and lights are the secret power of hearts. It is the 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 lifting of the veil. One of the images that perhaps can convey this meaning, and of course, then 50 nur, al-nur al-jundul qalb, which we've again, this one we talked about, that lights are like the armies of the hearts. Light, exactly like darkness is the army of the lower self, the base self. And then again in 55, which we haven't yet covered, النور له الكشف والبصيرة لها الحكم والقلب له الإقبال والإدبار, which, let's see the basic translation of it. Insight, kashf, belongs to light. Discernment, hukm, to the intellect. We'll talk about this. To the intellect in quotes, basira. And both progression and retrogression belong to the heart. This one, inshallah, we'll talk about. But how do we understand the very role and the very idea of light? One of the best metaphors that have stayed with me, it's like a person that enters a home, and in this home there are very valuable things. There are things that are life-saving, things that greatly enrich you. But also in this home, there are very dangerous things. There are poisons, there are scorpions, there are snakes, and it's a completely dark home. This is like the dunya that we're born into. You come to this world and you have the illusion of light when the sun comes up, and the illusion of darkness when it's night. This is neither the real darkness nor the real light. The world we live in, it's as if it's a dark place full of things that are greatly enriching and things that are greatly harmful. And the basira, the light that comes from God, is like the light that is given to you so that you can differentiate between good things and bad things in that home. So it's like someone giving you a lantern. So now you can go into the home and you can avoid the snakes and you can avoid the scorpions. That's why, when Allah says, "Ya ayyuha alladhina amanu in tattaqullaha yaj'al lakum furqana," that if you are truly pious, Allah will give you the power of discernment. That's furqan. Or when Allah says that those who truly fear God, نجعل له نورا يمشي به بين الناس, that we will grant this person a luminosity that lights the path that this person can use to traverse. So, and when I say that we normal human beings tend to feel safer when it's morning, when there's sunlight, and tend to have some degree of apprehension about darkness. But that is only the physical reality. And I'll give you a real example in 1 second. That is only a physical reality. The light of luminosity, the light that we are talking about, exposes a very different reality that we live, that surrounds us on this earth, that has nothing to do with the sun or the moon. So, for instance, auras. I mean, just one example, that all human beings carry their aura wherever they go, for better or for worse. That your sins are registered on your auras. I mean, this is something that normally you don't see, but it is an undeniable and an inescapable reality. If only people could see that they walk around with banners, literally banners that say, I've done X and I've done Y. If you killed someone, it will reflect on your aura. If you've committed adultery, it's in your aura. If you are a cheater and a deceiver, it's in your aura. Literally, it's like you walk around with a sign saying, this is me. So when we talk about the light of discernment, that's why when we talk about a Sufi sheikh who has the light of discernment and can look at a person and tell you, or have what they're reading is this person's aura. But there's another example that I'm thinking of that I want to talk about. This is recently I was listening to a Sufi sheikh, Sheikh Karkari, doing an interview at Chicago Divinity University, Divinity School at Chicago. What's the name of the professor that was?
Yusuf K. Swift.
Say again?
Yusuf K. Swift.
Professor Casewit, who was interviewing him. And Sheikh Karkari was talking about the role of something we haven't really discussed. I mean, it has to do with tariqas, but anyway, the role of siyaha in his life, that for 10 years, part of the dynamic of tajarrud, part of the dynamic of relinquishing your attachments to this earth, which inshallah we will delve into much deeper when we get to the 60s. Part of this dynamic of tajarrud, that relinquishing attachments to become, and as we'll talk about that, that approaching nearness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala demands purification from attachments that are debasing to the self, because they act as impurities. They act as impurities in your relationship to Allah. And so part of this process of cleansing your worldly attachments is what you go on something that Sufis call siyaha, and the siyaha, and what Sheikh Karkar was talking about, is where you literally detach yourself from everything. Your family, your friends, and you go in complete khalwa, alone, solely as a person, and you travel on the face of the earth, and you discover how in traveling by yourself with the awrad and with the worship, you discover how and in what way all creation it praises, does the tasbih. Allah, when Allah describes to us that everything in creation supplicate the name of your Lord, but Allah says, but you don't understand them. Well, the journey of siyaha does enable you, because you literally, during your siyaha, you talk to the trees and you talk to the mountains and you talk to the rivers and you talk to God and you talk to the stars and you talk to the moon and you talk to the sun, and till the point where you can hear them respond back to you. So you actually enter into a communion with all living things. And so many Sufi tariqas think that the siyaha is a critical step to full liberation and full insight. Now, many tariqas do believe in the physical siyaha, that you in fact enter into complete isolation. As I said, the problem in a place like the United States, the problem with siyaha is, a place like the United States, and unfortunately increasingly so, and even in Muslim countries. I mean, it's been a while since I've been to Egypt, but my last visit was extremely alarming, some 10 years ago. But anyway, if you have the insight, you will actually see how so many deserts and forests in the United States are demon infested. And they would not be safe for you to do siyaha in. You are literally be traveling in areas where the demonic can influence human beings to cause you great harm. Does this have to do with all the massacres that were committed against Native Indians? Does this have to do with all the massacres that were committed, or all the death and killing that was committed in the Civil War? Does this have to do with all the crimes, all the satanic groups? There could be a million causes. But there is no question that the demonic is, demons are quite widespread and do populate a lot of forests and deserts that I've traveled to in the United States. Sadly, this is, and as I said, this is happening also elsewhere, including, at least what I've seen. Muslim countries don't get some type of immunity if your population is indulging in drugs and alcohol and murder and rape and so on. You open portals, you open pathways to demons, and they do populate, and they do influence human behavior. And you do see that once you have the light of discernment, and you see it in undeniables and conclusive ways. In fact, you realize the extent to which you grow up in blindness once you actually see what occupies the space that we live in. So why am I saying all of this? Because there is, and this is a different form of siyaha that I believe in. It's controversial. A lot of teachers will strongly disagree. But I believe that السياحة, the process of journeying and discovering or opening yourself to the light through communing with living things, is possible without traveling from one location to another. That they call this السياحة الفكرية, that you can travel sitting in one place within your intellect. If you learn the dynamic of khalwa and tajarrud, and you can speak to the trees, to the oceans, to the rocks, to the mountains, as you sit, and speak to God as through exclusively through the power of the intellect as you sit in one spot. And that, like the process of journeying on the face of the earth, you do commune, and you do commune very effectively. And that this opens you up to the visitations of al-anwar, the visitations of enlightenment and al-furqan and discernment. It's harder because you must achieve total and complete intellectual detachment. In other words, your mind and heart must become so detached that a fire could break out around you and you wouldn't feel it. You could burn to death and not feel anything, because you are traveling and you are communing solely through the travels of your brain. And so this it becomes important as we talk about let's see, in this book, 56 or 55, depending on which book you're using. Okay. So let's, النور له الكشف والبصيرة لها الحكم والقلب له الإقبال والإدبار. So let's go to the basic translation. So, okay, insight, kashf, belongs to light, discernment, hukm, to the intellect, basira, and both in retrogression belong to the heart. This is the basic translation. All right. So, probably a good introduction is to underscore that to remember and to reflect on Allah's message. When Allah tells us, إن تتقوا الله يجعل لكم فرقانا, or when Allah describes those who are as if they're dead, من كان ميتا فأحييناه وجعلنا له نورا يمشي به بين الناس, that Allah will grant them a light to guide them, that they actually walk. This light illuminates their paths so that they can traverse and walk among human beings. In this context, we speak about the visitations of light as you are committing, as we've talked about, you are committing to commune with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You cleanse the self to purify the self so that it can be as pure as your best efforts permit, because it is impurities that will obstruct your process of communion. Moreover, it is, if you are in a state of true Islam, you internalize within the self your iman in Allah's absolute power, and that everything is ultimately in Allah's hands. And what you are saying is, Allah, allow me to see you in everything. Allah, I know, because you told us in the Quran, that you are everywhere. And in fact, you are the only truth, because you are the beginning without beginning. You are the end without an end. In other words, you're not bound by time and space. You are, as Allah says in the Quran, you are the only thing that always remains and that is truly constant. You are the only thing that is not subject to the laws of causation and physics. You are beyond our understanding. So we are born from that truth. We come from that truth. But born from that truth, the life we lead on this earth doesn't necessarily perpetuate or honor that truth. So although we come from something that is absolute in its truth and its purity, in its luminosity, in so many ways, our life on earth is a delusion. We start relying on material things, although we know that material things do not have a truth in and of themselves. You know, in modern science, we know that material things, even the laws of physics, break down at the subatomic level, or whatever it's called. We know that even from modern science, I mean, in old days, it was the philosophies of people like Mullah Sadra or Ibn Arabi that would reveal to us the extent to which we construct material reality. We invent the material reality that we live in. But modern science has already bolstered and supported so much of what the old philosophers said about material reality. It has no truth to itself. And the irony is that although we are born from this truth, we live in falsehood. Now, to return to that truth, so when you talk about this process of luminosity, of tanweer, I mean, we would spend hours upon hours talking about the nature of light. And I don't want to, do the topic injustice by after these halaqas, people would say, well, we're still confused about what the light is about. It is about returning to the truth. So if you know that you came from this absolute truth, at a logical level, you say, well, I came from this absolute truth. I came, but yet my life as a human being has a lot of confusions. If I'm really honest with myself, a lot of the positions, ideological positions that I take, arise from self-interest. So, if you are born Iranian, you defend certain Persian positions. If you're born Arab, you defend certain Arab positions. If you're born Egyptian, you defend certain Egyptian positions. If you're honest with yourself, this has to do with your lower base self, not with your haqiqah, not with your truth. The fact that you are influenced by an American perspective, an Egyptian perspective, a Persian perspective, the fact that you are influenced by a family perspective, the fact that you tend to see an injustice as an injustice if your family suffers from it. But if you take the same facts, and now your family is in the position of the aggressor, and another family is in the position that you were in, you'll find, again, you're sympathizing with your families, and your mind will find justifications for switching from a position to its opposite. And this is what we do as human beings all the time. And it is contrary to being a truly moral, ethical human being. A truly ethical human being wouldn't be influenced by whether a set of facts happen to their child or to their parent or to their brother or to their sister. They would be only influenced by their knowledge of justice and knowledge of goodness. But as human beings, we come from truth, but we are marred, we are overwhelmed, we are drowned in falsehoods. Falsehoods of all types that are blind and ignorant in their nature. So when you are then saying, Allah, allow me to go back to you and be anchored in the truth that you are. Now, when you see Allah in everything, and this is something I'm going to emphasize a lot, so please don't get bored with it, because it is a critical point. So what you're telling Allah is, I know that you're the only truth, and I know that I came from you. Well, I want to see that truth in the same way that part of the truth is there are demons. There are demons that, a demon could be sitting in a forest and you could walk right next to the demon and you wouldn't have a clue. There are many other, the cosmos around us is full of things. That is, you don't perceive it, but it is definitely a part of the truth, as the angels are part of truth. So, and seeing Allah in Allah's creation is transcending your subjectivity to see al-haqiqah, to see the truth. So now the thing is, when through purification and through worship and through commitment and through suhbah and through siyaha, the travel that we talk about, suhbah is the companionship that you keep. Through all of that, you see the truth, and Allah lifts the veil so you can see the divine hand in everything. Something majestic and amazing, and it can only be experienced, it cannot be really described, happens. Is that when you see Allah in everything, you cease to see anything but Allah. So, when your heart opens up to the truth of the divine, you can't, what you used to think about the nature of a table, the nature of a house, the nature of a car, it changes, and it changes forever. And other things, let me approach it this way. Ask yourself, Allah creates creation, including you. Does Allah create creation, including you, out of angst, out of indifference, or out of love? You see, you can't avoid, I know that you're accustomed to Muslims telling you that you don't have to take a position on this, but you see, you can't avoid taking a position on this. Ask yourself, your creator, God created you. Did God create you because God had a beef to settle? So God created you but doesn't like you. I created you, but I don't like you. I sort of resent you. That's a possibility. Or did God create you and let's say, I'm indifferent. I don't really care. If it's not either of these, then what? How does God relate to what God has created? Intellectually, there is a voice in you that will say, well, creation, al-khalq, is such a majestic act. And if I, as Allah says to us, sihu fil ard, travel in the land and look at Allah's creation. And if I travel in the land and I look at Allah's creation, if I reflect upon what Allah's handiwork has done, what I see is a loving creator, a creator that creates and loves what that creator creates. Let me give you an example from another world, okay? You listen to classical music pieces, assuming you're not one of these people who says, well, music is haram. I hope you're not, because as I said in the khutbah, that Muslims were the first people on the face of this earth to introduce music therapy. I mean, can you believe we've gone from a people that use music for therapy and created awqaf for the care of dogs and cats to who we are today? It's just so, anyway. So you listen to the music of Beethoven, Mozart, Rachmaninoff, Shostakovich, who's even, Russian guy who used his music to protest despotism and tyranny and things like that. The least you can say about when you listen to these compositions is that this composer loved the music they created. You can feel that love once you understand the music. You can't describe the relationship between the composer and the music in terms other than love. It is great amount of care and passion that went into this music. There are modern composers who I think have traveled from the paradigm of the godly to the paradigm of the demonic, who create music that you listen to and say, the composer who wrote this music writes in the notes, do not perform beautifully. when they write their instructions, they say affirmatively produce an ugly sound. Something intuitive in us would say, we don't want to listen to music that the composer produced out of hate, or the composer seems to have an embedded resentment towards their own creation. Why should we value that? That is al-fitra. That's your intuition. Now, when you open and purify yourself and you see the divine in everything, as generations of Sufis have described it, you see the handiwork of love. This is, you see the handiwork of love in everything that Allah created. When something that Allah created is corrupted by the demonic, it is taken away. What the demonic does is that it comes in and contaminates something created out of love and injects it with hate and angst. So, one of the most profound experiences in the experience of light is, as I said, it is as if someone is giving you a lantern as you enter this dark home that is full of both treasures and dangers. But one of the most profound experiences is that the lantern starts showing light, where you see God's love in creation. And eventually you will see God's love in your own creation, that you were created out of love. So now let's go back. So when it says an-nur lahu kashf, so first, light is the power of discernment. A kashf, literally, a kashf is like when you show a light upon something and you see it in light. That's kashf. When a doctor examines a patient, we call that a kashf. Why? Because a doctor is lifting the veil on a disease or on an infection or on an ailment. We call that kashf because it reveals something. So it's saying light, an-nur lahu kashf. Kashf of what? That the light comes and allows you to see the divine in everything. And eventually, when you see the divine in everything, you will cease to see anything but the divine. But that's another stage. A kashf in what? The light comes and lifts the veil on love, on Allah's love. Allah's love in everything that Allah created. Lahu kashf on what? It will lift the veil on, while what comes from the divine is love. What comes from the anti-divine, the demonic, is hate and angst. So, an-nur lahu kashf, they call that warid al-intibah. And I'll explain that in a second. Warid al-intibah is for a stage where they call it's this for the stage of a talibin. So, okay, what does this mean? So, the light, the first experience with light is it is as if it grabs your attention and sets you on your path. So it is like saying, okay, it's time for you to see reality in a very different light. So that's why they call it intibah. Intibah literally means alertness or paying attention. So it is warid al-intibah. So it's like the first stage or in the dynamics of enlightenment. Why is it the first stage? Because it grabs your attention and says, okay, now it's time for you to start seeing things as to their truth, as to their haqiqah. And that stage we call the stage of a talibin, the seekers. So you'll often find books called Minhaj al-Talibin, for instance, the method of the seekers. What they're talking about, a talib literally means someone who seeks, and that's why we call students talib. Students called a talib. But in this context, are those who experience the light at the very first stages of drawing their attention and lifting the veil so that they have their first experiences with true discernment. I just learned, Rami was mentioning that Sheikh Karkari doesn't accept murids, doesn't accept students unless they first see the light. So he requires that you first see the light, so you actually first achieve that stage of warid al-intibah before he'll accept you as a follower, as a murid, or as a student. Which is interesting. I've never heard of that before. I mean, that was news to me, but it's very interesting. I mean, anyway, the methodology that I used to, or that I've always, is that you train in order to have your first experience with light, and then you go on from there. But anyway, I thought it was just fascinating that that's how they do it. Okay, now Nur Warid al-Intibah is for al-Talibin, those who are seekers, the first stage. Then by repeating, if you're doing it with a sheikh, the sheikh gives you different awrad to go to the next stage of Nur Warid al-Iqbal. So now your experiences of light become sufficiently sustained, sufficiently consistent. Your experiences with light become at will. That the reason they call it Warid al-Iqbal is that you are literally a sojourner. You are journeying towards the light. Now, there are numerous rules that if you're doing with a sheikh, the sheikh will tell you, so that you can, so for instance, when you are in this process of from Warid al-Iqbal to from ورد الانتباه to ورد الإقبال, that among very common things is that you fast from talking to people, that you limit your interactions with human beings, in that, in our modern age, you don't watch television, you don't. So in order to maintain the process of the sojourning, this they call مرتبة السائرين or نور السائرين, literally, not a talibin, but now you are, السائرين means those who journey. So from the first visitations of light to the sustained experience with light, you should be at this stage having the experience with light at will. Although I've seen some complications with that, depending on. And then the final, or is warid al-wisal. Now, warid al-wisal, which is often nur al-wasilin, is where your communion with the divine, with seeing the divine in everything, is constant and unwavering. This is, few people reach that stage, and it's not necessarily the case that they all become shuyukh of tariqas, because there are a lot of people who achieve warad al-wasal, and that's a stage of life. But put it this way, their experience with light is so sustained that light exudes from them all time. Unless you are you're a person who's oppressed by darkness, because people oppressed by darkness can look at a person who is luminous and not see it. And in fact, they're sometimes repulsed by people of light. So, it's. But if you're assuming that you don't have that problem, you'll see it. It's undeniable. You see it as exuding from people who reach warad al-wasal. Now, notice that with light we speak of these three stages, right? So you have al-intibah, where the first stage of alertness, and al-iqbal, where you're actually sojourning, and then al-wisal, which is the ultimate. So many Sufis point out that reflect on the fact that you have these three stages, like you have in relationship to Islam itself. You have Islam, Iman, and Ihsan. Now, they don't say that these are exact parallels, but they will definitely say that those who reach the stage of Sa'irin, they have reached the stage of Iman. They have gone beyond just the stage of Islam. And that those who reach the stage of Wisal they will have reached the stage of Ihsan. It is impossible for someone to be at the stage of Wisal and not be a manifestation of Ihsan. In fact, it is a sign of falsehood. If you see someone, even if 1 million people come and tell you, oh, this is a wasil, this is a person who have reached the stage of Wisal, but you look at the behavior of this person, he's not a muhsin. He doesn't exude beauty. He doesn't perform beauty in everything, in being, in mercy, in compassion, in generosity, in fairness, in all these beautiful values that we relate to as human beings, then know that there is a falsehood. There is something wrong. Absolutely, without a shadow of doubt. Also, notice in the same way that you have Islam, Iman, Ihsan, you also have the three which we talk about with Sharia and Tariqa and Haqiqa. That Sharia is normally those who still have their first flirtations with light are still at the Sharia level. They understand the externalities of law. I mean, again, it's not an exact parallel, but most definitely, those who have gone beyond to Warid al-Iqbal, their relation to Sharia becomes, they have a comprehension of Sharia that you can describe them as on tariqa, on the path to what? On the path to haqiqa, the truth that Sharia is supposed to serve and not the other way around. It is not that the haqiqa serves the Sharia, but the Sharia serves the haqiqa. Okay. Let's see if I forgot anything. Yeah, there is, well, no, we could cover this with another principle. It's not necessary right now. I know this is heavy. This is heavy. Okay, let's take 3 minutes. Just let it settle for 3 minutes. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. So we took the break and then we realized we should pray Maghrib. So that's why it took some time. Okay, so let's go back to النور له كشف. So light unveils, as you said, والبصيرة لها الحكم والقلب له الإقبال والإدبار. So what the rest of this principle is saying is that Basira is the power of discernment through wisdom, particularly. So it is not necessarily just the intellect working through correct logical thinking, but the intellect assessing the credibility of things, the intellect assessing the legitimacy of things, the sensibility of things. So at the same time that you understand that your experiences with illumination and the light, the reason that in the same aphorism that the al-basira or the intellect is mentioned is that ultimately it is your reliance is on the intellect to assess and to investigate and to interrogate the quality of your experiences with the lifting of the veil. And this is a different way of saying never relinquish the use of your intellect in even in your ecstatic experiences. It is, and especially when you remember the number of times that you are warned that the demonic can intervene and can give you false experiences. This happens with the seeing of Jesus all the time, where people, especially, people who see Jesus in ways that have clear racial overtones. If they were using their intellect rigorously, they would interrogate that experience. In our side of things, when your perception was, or what your experiences with the light are self-serving in ways that are lend to a sense of, so for people, for instance, that have tell you that we had an experience with the light and we saw ourselves that we are, that the future of Sharia depends on us. I mean, he wasn't quite that extreme, but I know a guy that became convinced that he should find his own tariqah after he had and it was just, it was clearly from shaitan, and people with proper suhbah told him that this is, he should reflect on this, and that things that are self-serving, just so, someone that sees a vision that they should promptly divorce their wife, that would be another example. It doesn't mean that it's necessarily false. It means that you should use your intellect to interrogate it and to be very careful with it, and to, if in something like this, seek counsel. So, I mean, hopefully you know someone that has discernment that can, if you don't know someone, then unless, I mean, I don't want to give prescriptive advice, but anything that is not about God, but is more so about your own lowly person, then your basira, your power of discernment should step in and should sound the alarm of caution. And at a minimum, it should tell you, or someone that, and this is actually, I knew someone like that who said, oh, I had a vision, and after the vision, I going to resign my job, leave my family, and travel to Cyprus and go join this tariqah. But the only problem with this was that he's going to leave his wife stuck with supporting his 4 children. He had 4 children. And now his wife was going to have to carry the whole burden of, and her, her job wasn't the type of job that would come even close to replacing his income. Things like that are extremely suspect. And, I told him so, that this seems to be self-serving. This is not about God, but more about you and what you want to do, what you would find fulfilling personally. God, I mean, I'm being cautious because there are always some exceptions for people who are called upon truly to do something truly exceptional. But in the vast majority of situations, your communion with God doesn't lead to these types of messages. It's more about how you see the world, how your relationship with Allah is, not how you make life decisions or anything like that. Okay, so the critical role of basira and the intellect, just because you're on this path, it doesn't mean that you're going to check out your intellect or exclude your intellect from playing an active role. And then the point about the heart, وَالْقَلْبُ لَهُ الْإِقْبَالُ وَالْإِدْبَارُ. The heart, while the nafs is normally where we talk about the lowly self, the heart is more elevated. However, the heart is often like a wild steed. It's difficult to control. And the heart tires, the heart wears out, the heart literally, as it says, al-ikmal wal-idbar, that it at times it is fully on board with you, and then for things that, and then it will go through phases where it is not cooperating. So the way that this whole aphorism comes as a reminder that if your heart is regressing and, how do you put it? Progressing and regressing. If your heart is on board, and then it is, your intellect should be in charge at those times that your heart is in regression through deliberation and insistence and patience, rein the heart in so that your experiences with the light, often, and especially, and this is in the next principle, but often when you have your first experience or your first set of experiences, there's such jubilation. What follows is very interesting, because after the first set of experiences and the sense of jubilation and so on, the heart goes through a phase as if, and Allah alam, is this just the heart or shaitan or whatever? But the heart is as if, okay, we've achieved it. Let's relax now. It's like, you've achieved the high grade. A little bit of conceitment, a little bit of like, okay, well, now you can relax. You don't have to work very hard, and you are warned that this is a time your basira, your intellect, has to step in and say, no, this is like finally the doors of possibility open to me. If I do things wrong, well, the doors that open will be shut firm promptly. If you mishandle your first experiences, the results are often very painful and prolonged. It takes you a long time before you will have your second experience. If you have to fix the damage done. Okay. Yeah. So that's why in the principle that follows, let's see, I just want to. Yeah, okay. No, I did. This relates to the point I was just making. I'm just reminded from the text. No, wait. Okay, no, sorry, scratch that. Let's go to the principle after it. I'll cover it. I'll cover it under that principle. Okay, so لا تفرحك الطاعة لأنها برزت منك وافرح بها لأنها برزت من الله إليك قل بفضل الله وبرحمته فبذلك فليفرحوا هو خير مما يجمعون. So it says, the translation may be too literal. Let not obedience make you joyous because it comes from you, but rather be joyous over it because it comes from God to you. Then the Quranic verse, it quotes the Quranic verse, say in the grace of God and in God's mercy, in that they should rejoice. It is better than that which they hoard. Okay. So what this is saying is relates to the point that we were just talking about. That al-ta'a literally means obedience, but as a word, it relates to any act, any development, any act that is pleasing to God. So the very experience with the visitation of luminosity, with the experience with the light, with the veils opening to you, is described as a ta'a. Now, underscoring that point again and again, as you've noticed and will notice again, is that it is poison to think, oh, this is all because of my good, hard effort. That sense of self-satisfaction or sense of, some people, conceit, arrogance, or a sense of, yeah, I'm fine with God because I wouldn't have had this experience if I wasn't. And what it reminds you time and time again is that this is a gift from God. This is an act of grace by God to you, that it comes from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Every time you are inspired to do something good, that is indeed a gift from Allah, because you don't see the way that Allah protects you from demonic influences, either real external demonic influences, meaning real demons, or your own base self, so that in fact you can persevere long enough to do what's good. It is always healthy and meaningful to think of all good as coming from Allah. In fact, when you attain discernment, you will realize that all good is an act of love from Allah. That every time I am doing good, Allah is reciprocating my love. And so it is the ihsan, the very nature of ihsan, it is the manufacturing of love between God the Creator and the human being the created. We are doing ihsan, beauty, goodness in everything that we do because of that love between the human being and the maker of the human being. And that's the most amazing thing when you I mean, it even affects your approach to Sharia. I mean, I must admit to you that if Allah inspires me to write a beautiful poem, every sense recognizes that this was an act of love from Allah. If Allah inspires me to compose, I don't compose music, but if I did, if I could, I wish I could. If I could compose beautiful music that touches the soul, it is an act of love from Allah. The thing that you realize is everything that is beautiful in our existence is an act, and every act that is ugly is like turning away from Allah's love. And that is why ugliness becomes so problematic. It is that if it is us who don't understand the nature of God's love and God's beauty, and because we think that God's love and God's beauty begins and ends with the law, we end up committing a lot of egregious acts of ugliness. But it is if you have, and this is the thing. I mean, every testimonial about a true experience with the divine will talk to you about the same thing. The truth of love at the heart of every act of ihsan. And that is why when we show God's love by being agents of God's love, so we go, for instance, and feed people who are starving. What are we telling these people? We're saying we are agents of God's love. God wants you to be fed, and God enabled us. We are privileged because God chose us to be the agents that deliver this message of God's love. When we allow people to starve to death, we have failed God's love. And that failure is horrific. So as you read here, that remember that you should be happy about every act of goodness and every act of ihsan performed. You should celebrate it. But don't celebrate it as coming from you or your people or your family or your whoever. It's like when I see aid convoys, and unfortunately I've seen this especially in underdeveloped countries, but an aid convoy, and it will say, it was a message from the president of Egypt or the king of Saudi Arabia. No, an aid convoy, we should celebrate an aid convoy, but from Allah. You were privileged that Allah put you in a position to be able to be the agent of this goodness. Now, and that becomes a philosophy in pursuing beauty and pursuing love, God's love. God's love is never for people to suffer. It's never for people to people's rights to be taken away. God's love is manifested when you see the effects of God's love on people. And that all comes from the experience with the veil lifting, because without the veil lifting, all of this is theory to you. Okay. Now, here, this is, it's incorporated by some, left out by others. In Zuruq's Sharh, he does mention it, although briefly. I think it's important, so I'm going to talk about it. So it'll say that, recall that when people do good, the reactions to doing good by those who do it varies. And it often varies in proportion to the enlightenment of the heart and the purification of the heart. So, at one level, those who do good and they are happy about doing good, but why are they happy? They are happy because they are thinking of Allah's reward. That they are thinking of دفع العذاب وجلب النعيم. That they are saying, okay, well, I'm doing good. Allah is going to reward me by either blessing my life or rewarding me with Jannah. That's jalb al-na'im. It's like I'm doing good, so I'm going to get good, or that I'm going to avoid hellfire. Daf al-azab. Yeah, and that is good. I mean, it's in the sense, but it's good at the most superficial level, because it is fundamentally selfish. It is all about, I am doing good, and ultimately I'm expecting from Allah my reward or the avoidance of punishment as a reward. It is fundamentally about you. And because you are expecting either jalb al-na'im, either to increase your blessings, or because you are expecting to avoid daf' al-azab, to avoid punishment, it is not about God. It is about you. And God relates to that act of doing good exactly to the nature of the act. It is about you, so you will know nothing from that. Nothing will be revealed to you about al-haqiqah, about the truth, or God's light, or God's love. You related to goodness through an act of selfishness, and that is what you will, what is the word I'm looking for? Reap. Like, when you harvest something. Yeah. So that's what you're going to get. Now, the second level is those who rejoice in goodness, in performing goodness. They're happy when they do good, but it has nothing to do with whether they will be rewarded or avoid punishment, but because the very fact that Allah blessed them with the inspiration and the ability to do good. So, you could give money, but think of when you give money or you have money to donate, think about it. Think of the amount of blessings and the amount of choice. God has chosen you. Think of the amount of enabling by Allah so that you are in a position to give money. Allah enabled you perhaps to study or to whatever successes you achieved in your life. Allah enabled you to be in a position where you are getting the income or achieving the income you are achieving. Allah enabled you in a very different way, is that people within your family, none of them got a disease that would, suck out all this money, because Allah could make someone very close to you have an illness and you spend all your wealth on trying to treat that person. All the gazillion dynamics that could take place. So the fact that Allah put you in a position to do that good is a compounded blessing, a blessing upon blessing upon blessing. It's just we take God for granted, so much so that we don't think about that. So now in the second level, so you have a cognizance of these blessings. You are not like the first category where you are selfishly thinking, what's my reward? But in this, you are happy because the fact that Allah chose you and put you in a position to do good is actually a positive sign of being in Allah's good graces. Every time you are in a position, earlier I was talking with someone who was in a position to do a tremendous amount of good for Usuli, for my work. This person reneged. The thing that I kept feeling is sorry for him. Because this person was denied God's grace in actually being chosen, not that he's doing a favor to Usuli, but it's actually Usuli who's doing him the favor by being in a position to be the agent of God's grace and God's goodness. And the failure to do so was his failure, but the withdrawal of God's grace. So عنوان الرضا that doing the act of good is عنوان الرضا والقبول, that it is a sign that Allah has accepted and Allah is blessing you. And the more good you do is more sign that Allah is blessing you by allowing you to be the agent of goodness. Now, they say that, of course, the difference is huge between the two. The third category, which is the ideal that we should work for. Of course, I wish that we taught our children that it's not the first category that should be sufficient. At a minimum, it should be the second category. But the third category is what we should all aspire to. And the Arabic is, they say رضاهم بالله or فرحهم بالله فرحهم بالله ولا شيء سواه. The third have reached the stage, and if your experiences with the light are sustained enough, you will know exactly what I'm talking about. The third have reached the stage where it is not that they are happy, that this is a sign of God's acceptance, or that they are in good standing with God. In fact, the I for them doesn't exist. They are happy by being completely absorbed by the divine, by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, in that they see themselves as nothing but Allah's will. Everything that they do, they are thoroughly cognizant that they are Allah's agent and nothing but Allah's agent. And so it doesn't, whether, of course, the first stage is they're well beyond the first stage, but even in the second stage, the issue of being chosen by God doesn't even enter their mind. They are God. It's as if, let's put it this way, as one teacher once put it to me, they realize that everyone is chosen by God. So they have transcended the desire for specialness. They are joyful at the fact that they are in close communion with God at all times. And so what they do because it cannot be but so, because of their knowledge that this is what God wants from them. So, give you maybe typically what you'll find was people who will literally help, like the Prophet ﷺ. He has in his house are 3 dates. Someone comes knocking at the door, he gives them the 3 dates. It's not, the Prophet ﷺ doesn't think, well, I'm giving this person the 3 dates because I will be rewarded in heaven. The Prophet doesn't think, I will give this person the 3 dates because that means I'm close to God. The Prophet gives the person the 3 dates because the Prophet ﷺ can't think of any other possibility but to do good. There is no other option. It is being an extension of the divine will. So let's say, you're a teacher, and you, every context you go to teach, even though you will be attacked and derided and made fun of, but you continue doing it. And why do you continue doing it? You continue doing it because there is no other choice. You are simply what Allah wants you to be. not it is not that you think of my reward in the hereafter, and it's not that you think that, well, this will mean that I'm in a better standing with God. But what Allah wants, it has become an a, but it, uh, but Allah wants it become ingrained within your very soul. And but the thing is that for that stage, the ego cannot exist. That you see the complete dilution and melting away of the ego. What time is it?
8:30.
Are you guys okay? Okay. All right. Yeah, 57 just reaffirms the same principle, or 58, depending on on the version that you have. Okay, so قطع السائرين له والواصلين إليه عن رؤية أعمالهم وشهود أحوالهم. أما السائرون فلأنهم لم يتحققوا الصدق مع الله فيها، وأما الواصلون فلأنه غيبهم بشهوده عنها. Okay. So first let's do the basic translation. God prevents those who are voyaging to God from witnessing their deeds, and those who are united with God from contemplating their states. Not quite. Okay, anyway. God does that for the voyagers because they have not realized sincerity towards God in those works. And God does that for those united with God because God makes them absent from contemplating those states by contemplating God. Okay, let's break it down. قطع السائرين له والواصلين إليه عن رؤية أعمالهم وشهود أحوالهم. So it's the translation is not quite. It's saying that both those, remember that as-sa'irin are those who are journeying, al-wasilin those who have achieved communion. So it's telling both those who are journeying towards the divine and also those who have actually achieved communion with the divine. He's not exactly saying that it is God that doesn't allow them to see their deeds. What he's saying is that both categories of those who journey and those who have arrived or communed, both of them should not see their deeds. In other words, should not rejoice or be self-satisfied about their deeds. And then he's saying, but for two very different reasons. As those who are journeying, is because the reason that they should not be satisfied with their deeds is that is because they're working on purifying their intentions. So what he's saying is that for that first category, there's always a question of what is your intention behind the good deed that you've done. If it's self-promotion, like I'm doing good so that people will say that I am a good doer, or I'm doing good so that I will get a tax break, or I'm doing good so that people will think of me as a philanthropist and as an important person. Well, that's a problem, because that takes away from the hasanat of your good deed. But then, second, so this is the most base level. Now, higher than that is, okay, I'm doing good because I don't want to go to hell, and I want to go to heaven. It's higher than the first, but it's still pretty elementary. And so you're still working at purifying your intentions. So you are journeying. When you do good, you are under an obligation to interrogate your intentions and to keep working at perfecting these intentions and purifying these intentions and making these intentions at a higher state. So you're going to go from, I do good because I like prestige and I like praise, to I'm doing good because I want to go to heaven, to I'm doing good because I want to know that I'm in God's good grace, and to I'm doing good because I am God's agent, I am God's very tool, I am God's very hand. And I do good because there is no other choice. So you are working on your intentionality, and hopefully it's not it's not that hopefully, but indeed you are not going to be able to purify your intentions, especially from the base level to the higher levels, without improving your communion with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because, for instance, achieving the highest level is impossible without understanding God's beauty and God's love. And these are not reachable unless you have the veil of human egoism and human self-centeredness and human pettiness lifted from your eyes. And then you start seeing what this life is about. And it's not about, being pro-family or pro-tribe or pro-nation or pro-ethnicity or pro-language. If you're still like that, then you're at a very base level. It is impossible once you realize, for instance, how God looks at ethnicities and languages and differences, and how absolutely immaterial they are in light of God's love. You're forever changed. You're just impossible. Or even genders, for that matter. I mean, that's another thing, is that it affects your relationship to law when you realize that men and women really just exist for us, but they're completely immaterial in in the sight of divine love and divine goodness and divine beauty, again, it just completely alters everything. The way that you see even this category or that category. So what he's saying though is that, so the first group has the reason that the first group ought not rejoice at its own deeds or see its own deeds as all important or as a huge accomplishment is because they're constantly working on their intention. The second group, al-wasilun, those who are in communion, no longer see their deeds in the sense they don't count their good deeds. They don't even remember, oh, I've done good to this person. Oh, I gave this person that. Oh, I've helped this person get a job. Oh, I did. They don't even remember. They do it because it has become their nature. Now, why? Because, and this is, فَلِأَنَّهُ غَيَّبَهُمْ بِشُهُودِهِ عَنْهَا, is because once they see the light of their Lord, once they see the beauty of their Lord, once they see the love of their Lord, once they see the truth about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they can no longer count brownie points. God and God's beauty is so overwhelming, and God's love is so overwhelming that to remember, oh, I've done a service to this person, it is the most ridiculous thing in the world. Or, oh, I'm so good to these people and, they're not good to me. All of this stuff becomes it seems like the most absurd thing. Or, oh, I favor this ethnic group, or I favor this nationality, or I favor this language. All these things, all these human pettiness melts away before your eyes, because in the light of God's majesty and God's absolute everything, God's absolute mercy, God's absolute compassion, God's absolute beauty, God's absolute goodness, God's love, you nearly, don't take this literally, but you nearly feel ashamed being human. Once you have had these experiences, you sort of eat and you nearly feel like you should apologize to God that you're eating. That, okay, I'm sorry that I'm still human and I have to eat, or I have to go to the bathroom, or I have to do human things, because you can't get beyond but you're very conscious of them, because you see where you came from. Remember, we started the halaqah by saying your haqiqah, your truth, is from there. This is where you came from. This is who you really, really are. And this is where you're going to go back. Unfortunately, some of us have lost the way, so much so that they will have to go to the demonic. They're not going to go back to the divine. Hopefully, for a period of time to cleanse their sins, and then they'll rejoin the divine. But anyway, I don't want to get into that. But anyway, but this is where you're going to return if you purify yourself. That is that truth, and that truth is so majestic, so boundless in its love, so magnanimous in its beauty, that all these other things seem petty and silly and not worthwhile. It is, I keep saying this, but it is impossible for a man of God or a woman of God who has communed with God to be a petty human being, to be egotistical or to fight over uh, little egotistical things. Then they're regressing, then their qalb is regressing, and they need to go back to the workshop to purify again, which all of us do because we're humans. I mean, I mean, my love for some of the people who taught me, it makes me, like, if you ask me, I feel about them that they have become sinless and that they can do no error. But my basira, my intellect tells me that that's my heart speaking, not the truth. That no human being is beyond error. And so they must have faults, but also I trust them enough. I mean, they're all passed away, unfortunately, now, but when they were alive, I would also trust that even if they regress for over something or a period of time, they're going to fix themselves because they have that transparency and they have that cleanliness and they have that truth about them that will make them in due time notice and you know what do you do with the cars when you go you put a car in for service? You know, they will send their soul for service and get a little tweak. You know, yeah. Okay, what time is it?
8:50.
Okay, let's stop here then. Okay, Alhamdulillah, we will stop here, and when Subhanallah, the section we're going to start next with the next aphorism, there is a whole section on tama, on greed. And I'll explain why, inshallah, why there are so many principles dedicated just on the topic of tama or greed. Very important. Inshallah, that's for the next halaqah.
Okay, Assalamu alaikum, Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. As always, there's just nothing to do except express gratitude and thank you for taking the time, to give us so much knowledge and so much wisdom. Again, look at these translations, and there's just no way we would have the ability to even understand, a very small portion of what you've said. And so you covered so much about God's light and God's love that I think is so beautiful and transformative. It seems silly to say more. I mean, it leaves you speechless, but thank you so much. It was really, really deep and so much to reflect on. I'm so grateful. So I don't know. I just wanted to actually, is it okay if we take a moment to say hello? Okay. So what we're going to do is we'll end the live stream every so often. I think it's just really lovely to have the opportunity to just say hello to people online. So thank you, everyone. First of all, let me just say proper goodbye. Hope everyone has a wonderful week, and inshallah, I believe next week we're probably going to meet on Saturday. But take a look at the weekly email. We'll send out email announcements. If you guys are joining us from YouTube and you don't get the weekly email, definitely subscribe. You can go to the website and subscribe, and then you'll get an email that gives you the updated information about what time we meet and any other stuff that's going on. It gives you the transcription to the previous week's khutbah. And other good stuff, so definitely do that. But I hope everyone has a wonderful week, and inshallah we will see you. But people online, if you have a moment, if you'd like to stay and just say salam to Sheikh, just hang on until we end the live stream. So everyone on the live stream, salam alaikum.